MLB slate. Not a good night for me in the NFL last night. I just couldn't get the right pieces, couldn't get them put together in the right places. Had some fun calls that I ended up with, I think 20 something% Zacchaeus, maybe, at least in the bigger buy-ins. And he was 2% owned, and of course, he hit the touchdown, the first touchdown of the night. But it was a little frustrating. Sheets, how did you do? And then we'll jump into this big slate.
Well, I'll one up you. I had 40% Zacchaeus, and I lost too. So
there you go. Maybe that wasn't the answer. I guess Zacchaeus was the bad play then, huh?
He was a good play in the first quarter, I guess. And that was and then I didn't see him the rest of the day. What's the guy got to do to get in there? After this, by the way, we'll do an NFL first look as well. The other little announcement is I am doing some work with this contest sim stuff. I did a little work on how to analyze the contests after you did them to talk about what your simulated ROI is. I know a lot of people are a little ahead of me on that, but finally caught up, and I asked SaberSim a couple of questions, and I'm comfortable enough where I'm going to start doing kind of like a recap video of that. The other things I recorded in advance, which I'm not going to put up till after we do our preview video, is I do want to put out my own stuff about specific to SaberSim and specific about how this contest sim stuff goes. So what I did was a separate video of like the initial contest sims for the weekend. And again, everything's going to change, but just to give myself the tools to try to like improve my own use of it and help people learn how to do it. And I think I might do that as well, even with the last couple of baseball slates. Is we're going to go through the important stuff, which is like the game by game and like the analysis. And what I'll do is, how Bobby sometimes puts up his early builds or whatever, I may have put up my like early sims or something like that, like nice. early builds as well. And we only have like a week or so left in the regular season anyway.
Yeah.
But listen, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. One thing I also want to do, I want to take a look as I share my screen. And this is like one of those terrible things that people like me have to admit, is that I have no idea like who's in first place. I mean, it's like a week to go in the season, and it's so funny. Like you become a DFS player, you become so freaking jaded, and I'm like, all I know is that we keep on like playing teams against Minnesota, and Minnesota sucks, and they're in freaking first place. I'm like, what the hell? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, where have I been? But at least, and then you see Baltimore.
I have no business being in the playoffs, by the way. They just are they luck boxed into the right division.
Right. Like if you asked me, like, okay, I would have guessed that Tampa was around first because I know they go off to a hot start at least. Yeah. And I wouldn't have guessed Baltimore was in first. I just presumed that Houston was like 10 games in first place. You know what I mean? I didn't realize that Texas was actually in first. Seattle, I joked about being pretty good, but they actually were better, and they've lost 3 of their last 10, and they're still kind of in there. Nationally, you told me Milwaukee was in first place. Never would have believed it. Atlanta, I believe. You know what I mean? Like, team scores 30 runs a game. I have to imagine they're in first. And the Dodgers, I actually thought they had a better record than this.
Better than that, that's a pretty damn good record.
I know, but that's my impression. You know what I mean? Like, I thought they were like better than Atlanta as far as the records go. What do I know?
No. Everybody says, yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, so I don't know. It's interesting, and it is also somewhat relevant as we wind down the season.
It's been relevant, and I've been trying to track it. I always stay up to date on it anyway, but it is interesting because there are a lot of DFS people who literally don't have any idea what's happening in the things. And if you look at all the numbers, it's funny because like people, you say Minnesota. I think but the truth is they don't hit at all. They have their bullpen has been out of this world this year. You know what I mean? Things like that. And then Milwaukee does it with their starting pitching. They have awesome starting pitching, and they as good as anybody in baseball. And that's how they've done it. But it is interesting, and now it is relevant because we have teams that are actually battling, and there's a
I'm looking at the wild card, for example, like the American League. You got, I mean, Seattle's 1.5 out, so that's a big deal. In the National League, you have National League wild card. You have Miami 1 game out. Wow, that's amazing. And Arizona and the Cubs are tied on that bubble. Okay, so that's
and even Cincinnati's got a chance still. So
even Cincinnati still has a chance. Okay,
yeah.
All right. So I figure we talk about this in terms of like basketball, like who's going to rest their players or whatever. Yeah. So I think in terms of pitching and possible pinch hitting and stuff like that, Listen, I figure once a year it's worth me figuring it out. Did we bet on anything to win the World Series? I don't even think I did this year.
No, I don't think we did. I mean, I've said from the beginning of the year that Atlanta is the best team. The Dodgers are the second best team. Didn't really have anybody I wanted to take a wild gamble on. Texas and Seattle were my favorites for the American League early in the.
Well, you've been so good with the regular bets. I mean, you don't need
the Ranger ones.
You've been great enough with your regular bets throughout the year.
Yeah, even last night in football, everything sucks, but I go 4-0 with the bets.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, like you get everything right.
All right, so we're ready for. I guess we'll get started. Yankees, Toronto. Now, again, I'm going to go back to this just each time, just for my own benefit. So, Toronto, they are clinging to a wild card. They're 1.5 ahead of Toronto, of Houston, and Seattle is lurking. So they're throwing their ace. So I'm expecting him to be in there as long as necessary to get a win, I imagine. And he's against King, otherwise known as King of the World, coming off the 13K 101 pitch performance. But I will also like to say that
before that
this game before that, he was 8 strikeouts in 4 2/3. The game before that, he was 9 strikeouts in 5 innings. So as far as just pure strikeout upside goes, I mean, let's go. So I like Gausman and I like King, and I'm not getting to any of the hitting.
Yeah, so the thing with King is, okay, realistically, if there was ever a spot where like a guy, let's just say he was like 8K and really popular today, okay? Because that actually seems like it could be it should probably be the case. He's going to have some ownership, but honestly, like it's the obvious spot where okay, he threw his career high pitches. He's young. They're playing for nothing. We have no reason to pitch him that more than 80 pitches. But I'm not. Who says that in 85 pitches he can't get there anyway? It's 6K.
Plenty.
I'm with you on both of this. I like Gausman. I like King. I think that there's a weird argument for the flip side of the King thing, and maybe taking the Toronto side. Yankees have, like I said, nothing to play for. They're not playing at home. They don't need to put all their bet. They can throw some young arms out there out of the bullpen too that could get wild. Like just thinking creatively, that I kind of think that maybe zagging a little bit and playing some of the Blue Jays, something I considered at least. I don't know that I'm going to end up with any of it, but it's something certainly worth considering. While their lineup is it's pretty cheap after the top 3, so something I'm considering for later. All right. Tampa Bay. Why don't you start us off with Tampa Bay and Boston?
And before we get too far removed from that Michael King play, remember where we're headed here. I mean, we're headed for a Dodgers and Coors spot. You know what I mean? And we're headed for a Arizona against like arena spot. You know what I mean? There's hitting that's going to be desirable. So like something like King at 6K. You give me 80 pitches on a slate like this where we'd love to spend up for some stuff.
Right.
I'm kind of in there. Speaking of which, all right, so Tampa, Boston, I'm more inclined in this game to actually play Houck than the other side. Just again, because I don't think Eflin's that great a play. And the context of the slate, I'm more inclined to save money on pitching than to spend it. So I do have Houck as kind of like, an MME sprinkle, let's put it that way. Probably not going to be a priority though. And then as far as the hitting goes, again, I just like other teams better. I have Tampa as kind of like a secondary like MME type stack, if that helps you. But as far as like top priorities, really not much in this game for me.
Yeah, I think that this game feels a little bit the same for me. It is 55 degrees in Boston, and the wind's blowing in at 8 miles an hour. That's weird. Like I'm not used to seeing it that cold quite yet. I mean, and with the wind blowing straight in from dead center, so it's going to be hard for me to make an argument for the bats. Eflin versus Gausman. Gausman I know is a little more expensive, but I prefer Gausman. Eflin, probably should be on a long list if you're playing everything. So should Houck, but neither of them are going to make it for me in the tournaments that I play as of right now. I'm sort of out on those guys. All right. What do we got here for the next one here? The Mets. The Mets.
Miami Mets. So, boy, I didn't realize. I mean, that this game was not really like in danger because weather's awful today. I mean, like right now. I guess it'll clear up later. It's been like a disaster, like literally 3 days in a row, just like nonstop rain.
Yeah.
But I guess Roth and they all know what they're talking about. They might drizzle, and I guess it's going to clear up a little bit later. But right now, it's just awful out. It's probably going to be chilly, I imagine. So this is another. This weather's no bargain for hitting either. So with that said, I don't know. Why not? We just talked about Miami being in contention for something. I don't know. Then does that mean that it's more likely they leave Garrett in because of that, or they're more inclined to pull him if they really need to win the game? That's an interesting baseball question, which I'll leave you to that. Lucchesi, I guess, like the bottom of the barrel of my MME stuff. But for me, honestly, nothing here is that big of a priority. None of the hitting either. So maybe Garrett as just a MME play, maybe Lucchesi MME play, but nothing a priority for me here.
I think I might talk myself into Garrett at the end, and my answer to that question is really just depending on if he's getting wild or anything like that. He's done really well keeping his control. He's getting his control better. He's been consistently in the low 90s, and I don't, again, you want the guys to have the 100 pitch upside when they're 8,600. But I think that it's a good enough matchup that we've seen the Mets, sort of get exploited. We've seen both sides with the Mets. We've seen them crush lefties, and we've seen them just like they couldn't do anything right. And it's not a very intimidating lineup for lefties outside of Pete Alonso and Lindor, really. So I'm very into the idea of some Garrett. I have Lucchesi on my list, but it probably is. It's like a second tier play. And Garrett I have is just a little bit higher. I just think there's a better argument for him here. There is the upside. He can get the strikeouts fired up. I'm into the idea of some Garrett here, so I will sign on that one, assuming the weather's totally fine by then. Great pitching weather. It's 15-mile-an-hour winds blowing in from center. Hard to ignore that. So that's where I'm at.
It's worth noting that his last game was against these same Mets, and it was good enough. You know what I mean?
He was pretty good.
Yeah. 7 strikeouts, 5 hits, 1 run, 91 pitches. You take that again.
Mm-hmm. We sure would. All right. So then we get into to the Cubs and the Braves. Okay, Sheets. Okay, so this is probably one of the harder games to figure out what to do with. And maybe the answer is nothing. But I do feel like anytime, and I know it's the second best pitcher in the National League of this season, it does feel like, though, when you can get the Braves sub 5% and it's 80 degrees in Atlanta, there is 6-mile-an-hour winds blowing in from left. So it's not like everything is perfect hitting-wise, but still one of the better hitting spots you see on the slate. And I'm kind of inclined to maybe take a chance on some Braves. Now, what are they playing for? The only thing they're playing for is to hold off the Dodgers and get the home field advantage throughout the playoffs. The Dodgers are playing a doubleheader. Let's say the Dodgers win the first game of that doubleheader and are only 3 back going into this game. Also, Atlanta's been kind of struggling. I think Atlanta will play their guys if the Dodgers are only 3 back. If the Dodgers lose and are 4 back, I don't know that they're even going to necessarily play their guys not named Acuna. Acuna's going to play probably either way just because he's just wrapping up the MVP and getting the 40-70 and everything. But just there's a lot of ways this could go where we may be talking about Justin Steele, depending on what kind of lineup the Braves release. We may be talking about the Braves as a stack if they have their A lineup out there. And then I just am not quite getting to Bryce Elder, and I also think some of the Cubs are in play. So this is the game I had the hardest time with of all the games on the slate. And maybe the answer is to do nothing in that situation. I still think I might revisit this one with the Braves stack a little bit.
All right, I've got an opinion here.
Okay, let's
and it's again, it's not a lot of baseball, not a lot of statistics, not a lot of whatever. Just hear me out here. Okay, so the Cubs are on the Mason the Mason-Dixon line here. Okay, they're right on the border of making the wild card. They're tied with Arizona here. They're a half game up or whatever. They're tied with whatever, 1 game ahead of Miami. And so they're throwing the race. They're throwing Justin Steele. Okay, so Justin Steele, as you remember, he was in Cy Young contention. Okay, quite a while with what's his name, with Blake Snell. Blake Snell finished out the year, and his last two performances, Justin Steele just got beat up. Okay. And now you're putting him in this really kind of like must win or like really just like spot. And you're asking me what Atlanta has to play for, and not much. So you know what that means? You're going to get free swinging Atlanta. Like every night is like batting practice to them. I think Atlanta is just like an incredible play here. I think it's really just a very difficult pressure spot for Justin Steele's already kind of like almost crashed. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's a tough spot against the worst team to be in this position. And Atlanta just like every day they're getting up there and just freaking swinging for fences and swinging for whatever. And I think Atlanta is the best GPP play on the slate. That is my opinion as of 12:20 p.m.
I love it. All right. That's very interesting, and it's something that we're both sort of on the same page with it, because that was initially I was like this is too good of a tournament play, but I don't know, it just feels wrong because I'm like the biggest is really good guy.
Well, you know what? You're going to have the Dodgers and Arizona. They're going to just garner just like all the ownership.
Yeah. And
then you get the Atlantas to score 14 runs a game. You know what I mean? And I don't know. It just seems like that's what you're supposed to do. But we'll see.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. So do you have which game do you have next?
I have St. Louis, Milwaukee next.
St. Louis, Milwaukee. All right. Why don't you start that one off, because these are the same time.
Yeah. For me, Thompson is 5,500, and it's got to be a decent part of your player pool. For no reason, then he's 5,500. As I mentioned, Atlanta's got guys that cost a lot, and the Dodgers have guys that cost a lot. I think that you want to play those teams probably. So I think Thompson's absolutely in play here. Hauser not as much, and I'm not getting to any of the hitting here.
Yeah, so I don't mind the Thompson being in play. I agree with that. But I also think that the Brewers are like, the problem is it's back to the what do we play for thing. We're finding ourselves, but they're going to let Josh Donaldson have his cracks at a lefty. Tyrone Taylor's been hot against lefties. Canna, since he got there, has been really good. I think I can talk myself into a low-owned Brewers stack today. And St. Louis's bullpen has been terrible, and Thompson is definitely a volatile guy. So I'm very okay with the Thompson side, and I'm very okay with the Milwaukee side. Like you mentioned, like we talked about at the beginning, like it does feel a little scary to play teams without much to play for somewhat, but it's not like basketball where they're going to go out there and let them play like 4 innings, not this early, right? The last few days of the season, maybe, but not 6 to 7 days left. There's just, you still want your guys getting their hacks in. So I'm going to talk myself into a little bit of Milwaukee tonight. All right, so let's guys, we go in order of what time the games start. By the way, we get a lot of questions all the time jumping around games, but just so you know how we do it, that's the reason why we don't have a, when you say, hey, what about these guys, you didn't mention them, I'm like, well, that's because their games didn't come up yet. All right, Oakland and Minnesota. I guess I'll jump into this one. This is the game I thought we were going to talk about anyway. So Bailey Ober at 9,100, you could have the conversation between he and Garrett. I think that they're both fine options. Again, though, like what is like probably a very, very limited upside for Ober. Just in terms of how much they really want him to pitch. They probably I guess they want him to be as near his normal amount going into the playoffs. But maybe he's going to throw 90 pitches as a ceiling again, sort of a little bit like Garrett's got the higher upside. Ober is definitely. He's got more downside and less safety. So I think I'm preferring Garrett over Ober, but I do have Ober on my list. And it's good pitching conditions. Maybe I have to it's 64 degrees, 10-mile-an-hour winds blowing in from left center. I don't know how it happened. Everywhere they're blowing in today, except for like LA. All right. Anyway, and then I don't have the hitting because I just don't like, if I was going to take any hitting in this game, it would be lefties. And I don't like any of the lefties quite enough. Maybe Kirilloff is a one-off. At the same time, should I be considering Blackburn? Probably. Maybe I should. Yeah, you know what? I think I will get a little bit of Blackburn. So I guess it's just the pitching in this game for me.
Yeah, so I have both Ober and Blackburn in my my semi-short list. I guess the rhetorical answer to, what kind of, upside does Ober have or whatever it is, I guess I'll answer that by saying that we've been through like 6 games already and not been particularly impressed with anybody yet. Like except like Gausman, he's, you know what I mean? Like, I guess he'll pitch, you know what I mean? But I haven't been, and for, even though everything that I said about Justin Steele, I mean, if he's pitching well, I mean, they'll lean on him. You know what I mean? He'll pitch. You know what I mean? In this spot, But aside from that, I mean, that's not too much. So I guess Ober's got to be, pretty good option. And Blackburn, I like as well. Again, I'm not going to just go out of my way to play him in the 888 or whatever the hell thing is tonight, but he's certainly in there. And as far as value goes, I like both sides of this. Again, not priorities. I like the chalky bats, just today, if you want to know the truth, and which we'll get to. I like Atlanta, then we're going to get to everybody else that I like. But I do have Minnesota, Oakland as okay values, but, not priorities.
Yeah, that makes that, I understand. All right, so should we move over to the highest risk weather game and one of the better, potential hitting situations because of who's pitching?
Let's take a look at this first of all. Let me steal from Roth here for a second. And yep, he's got that yellow orange, so it's something worth considering.
Yep.
And I mean, so Arena, aka legend Jose Arena, from his last 2 games, 17 and 14 fantasy points when everybody just stacked the world against him, But like you said, I mean, this is, assuming the game goes, this is the top, one of the top spots on the board to take the Arizona side. I'm not getting to either of the pitchers. Obviously, I'm not getting to Arena, and I'm not getting to Davies, and I'm not getting to the White Sox either. So it's Arizona or nothing, and weather is a factor, and ownership is a factor. I think they're going to be just as highly owned as the Dodgers. Maybe not exactly that, but they're definitely going to be high owned, and it's something you have to consider.
Yeah, no interest in the hitting for me at all. Again, 10-mile-an-hour winds blowing in from left center in the stadium where it matters the second most in baseball. If you're going to play people, I would suggest playing lefties. And I think high ownership mixed with terrible hitting conditions and a run total that would be at 11 but is at 9 because Vegas respects the weather is definitely enough to keep me off of a chalky offense that I don't.
Fair enough. That's a good step in the right direction here with the slate.
Yeah, I'm just gonna avoid those ones if I can. All right, Dodgers in Colorado.
What's their team total? 7? I mean, what is it?
Their team total 7.5 for the first game today. Let me just double check for this one.
Oh, this is the second end of a doubleheader?
Yeah.
Ooh.
So definitely some and also like whether they win the first one of the doubleheader is probably going to dictate who they play. Because 3 games, I mean, look, if they're like 3 games with 6 to go is doable. 4 games with 6 to go is basically like.
What does that mean? What do they have to do?
They're 3 games back of Atlanta. If they win the first game of the doubleheader, they're 3 games back of Atlanta.
Oh, for the top seed, you mean?
The top seed, which does matter, And by the way, if you don't think it matters, ask the owners because that's an extra, however many millions of dollars.
That's true.
Home game. Yep. So they will try to get that number 1 seed if they, I believe if they're it's a 3-run thing. If not, I don't know what kind of lineup they're going to roll out because I don't think with 6 to go, and this seems like it's also a doubleheader, so it seems like a good spot to rest some people. So I have no idea how their lineup's going to shake out tonight. It's really impossible to know at this juncture. The first game starts in I don't know, like what, an hour or something like that. It's an early. They made it pretty early. Maybe not an hour. It's a couple hours away. Oh shoot! I just lost my MLB screen by accident. I closed it out. Anyway, so I like Bobby Miller a little bit here. I don't think that I'm going to end up using him, but I did think that he was a guy who made a little bit of sense as a contrarian play. For some reason, I'm not getting any pitcher because they don't have the idea. Sorry, I have to go back to the sheets. Can you go on this one? My MLB page disappeared, and they don't have the projections.
Well, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that you probably like the Dodgers somewhat today.
Yeah, I do. I just don't know who's playing.
Yeah, I don't think it really matters who's playing. I think that the weaker the lineup, probably the better.
It's interesting, yeah.
So I think the Dodgers are probably the best play. Ownership agnostic on the board. But you got to see who's playing, got to see what the ownership updates are, and all of that. But especially if you get weather issues in Chicago, if you lose that game, I mean, then the Dodgers are going to be pretty well owned, to say the least. But I like them. I mean, what's not to like? They're the Dodgers in course and against Feltner, whatever. So I like the Dodgers. I'm not quite getting to Bobby Miller myself right now. So for me, it's Dodgers.
It's a little too much. I wish he was like 7,900, and I would make it easier. Sorry, go ahead, Shoots.
That's it. Just Dodgers or nothing.
Yeah. I think the Dodgers are and I like Miller a little bit. I just think the 8,900 is a little bit more in Colorado than I can talk myself into. Now, on top of it being like the best, the second best offense in baseball in Colorado, it's also like the best hitting conditions of anywhere on the slate. It's 77 degrees, crosswinds, but they're 10 miles an hour, slightly leaning more towards out to left, but then crossed. So I do think that it's going to be hard to just fade the Dodgers tonight, especially when they might put a lineup. Like we might get some cheap stuff that we're not expecting in different lineup spots. And even though I like Bobby Miller, I think one way to just play intelligently would be to have a little bit of exposure to Colorado. It is Colorado. I believe he's had one start. I got to double check, but he's either had one start or no starts there before. As I mentioned, good hitting conditions out there. Colorado, because they suck, are not especially expensive. But no, maybe get maybe a mini stack like Nolan Jones and honestly, maybe that's the way you get different a little bit with your Dodger stack. Maybe you play a 4-4 with Colorado or a 5-3, or maybe you just you play Nolan Jones and you play Ryan McMahon and Chris Bryant, and I think that's a pretty reasonable 3-man at not too expensive a price. So I'm open to the Colorado thing, even though I do like Bobby Miller against this team specifically, but it is Colorado and it is good hitting conditions, and there aren't that many stacks outside of the chalky ones that I love. So, all right, Texas and Anaheim. I'll jump into this one. I personally, I'm confused because I'm seeing like the early projections like Reed Detmers, and I understand because the price and that he's been much better and all these things and he's been good, and it's still Texas. And Texas has a 5-run total. It's good hitting conditions in Anaheim, 74 degrees, a little wind blowing out. Sign me up for Texas as a pivot, and probably like the Angels, I guess, for value, but like they didn't make them quite as cheap as they probably should be, but they're still pretty cheap. I don't mind like both like the Angels mini stack and a Texas full stack. That's where I'm at here. Detmers is probably going to be just on the outside looking in. Although I don't mind if you want to mix him in with some of these other cheapos that we talked about.
Yeah, I think this game is pretty volatile for DFS. I think that you hit the nail with really all three, not even the nail because we're kind of unsure, you know what I mean? But I think all three prongs that you mentioned are viable. I think, listen, Detmer's a tough dude, you know what I mean? Like he keeps fighting through, he fights through trouble, he fights through whatever, and almost feel bad for the guy. You know what I mean? I think he should be on a better team if you want to know the truth. Nonetheless, he also can give up can give some stuff up, and again, I'm biased because I made all the money against him one time, you know what I mean? So I see what happens when he starts serving it up to the righties. And I consider Seager just as much of a righty as anybody else because I don't care who he's up against. So I agree that Texas is a very, very strong DPP play as well. I think them alongside of Atlanta are the two teams you really were supposed to play tonight, given everything else. And I almost want the White Sox game to play so that, let it play in the bad weather, like you're saying. You know what I mean? Like let it play and let people not care about the weather. Yeah. And I'll fade that. I'll fade the Dodgers and cross my fingers, right? And then I'll play Texas and Atlanta. I like that. And Detmers he's he can put up some numbers. I mean, if he puts up 25, you can't be upset that you didn't play him because he does have that in him. But I agree with your assessment. I think he's just sort of on the outside looking in as far as my top plays. I'd rather, to be honest, just pay the $6K for King. You want to know the truth,
right?
And the fact that I said it like that easily, is King going to be like huge chalk tonight?
I have a feeling that he might pick up some steam. It is still a tough offense that doesn't strike out a ton, but
yeah,
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, right now they've got Detmers similar owned. I don't think that's going to happen. I actually just looked though. Detmers has had 5 starts against the Angels and has really not given up anything, just for what it's worth. The one thing I'd point out though that does stand out is his strikeout rate is unbelievable. It's like 36% against this team. It's only 130 plate appearances, but still 130 bats, excuse me. But he's also walked 17 guys out of 130, so you get a 12% walk rate. That's pretty high. Just it gives me more of a. I actually think I will play a little. I will consider Detmers a little further, just after seeing that he's been pretty successful against them. And I also think I still am going to play some Texas. Just that's the way it is.
All right. So I'll start. So San Diego, San Francisco is a weird one. So once again, there's Lugo, who's always going to show up as an okay play. Not my thing. I just really don't play him. But maybe I should. I don't know. I don't really have him as a big priority today. And the Harrison is interesting because I identified this a while ago again because I had him a couple of times. Like I actually played him when he scored the 37 points against Cincinnati. Yeah. But and then they're playing San Diego. I bet against them on the bounce back there, and I was watching some weird stats. They were saying that he actually had like a terrible strikeout rate, especially for a lefty against lefties, like for his whole like minor league career too. It was like really weird. And then I thought the Dodgers were going to light him up. Remember that when I said they're just going to light the kid up? They didn't, but it's not like he did anything. He had 2 strikeouts, in 5 1/3 innings, and 9 fantasy points, and without only giving up 2 runs, I don't know, man. I think this is a dangerous spot for him again, So I think that the Padres are another one that I might take another shot at. So Padres, Texas, Atlanta, they all look very. I mean, they're obviously a little different, but they look very similar to me in that they have bats. They not that cheap, and they're going to be lower owned than the other teams that look like that. You know what I mean? So I kind of like San Diego here a little bit.
So I have a take on this game too. I think the Giants are underdogs for what reason, I have no idea. I think the Giants win this game easily. I think the Giants are a better team that are actually fighting for something where to them having just even like guys do not want to be under 500 when you get to that exact mark and you're 1 game under. You play for everything, and they play for everything every day anyway. They play the Tampa style of baseball. I like San Francisco as a stack. I think that I think they match up perfectly with a guy like Lugo. I don't really know how much history. I don't think he has hardly any against them. And also he's been sort of like 3 different pitchers in the last 5 years. So I don't really know what it even means if they did. But I like this matchup for them specifically. It's because of all the other bad weather on the slate, they haven't done much against Lugo, but again, he hasn't been unbelievable either. I just think I think it's a good enough matchup to where I will take a gamble on some of the San Francisco guys. Jock Peterson, super cheap. I know he hasn't been great lately. Yastrzemski, all these guys, especially the lefties against Lugo. And I have the Giants as a contrarian stack for me tonight, and I definitely like the Giants to win this game. I'm just so tired of this. The Padres are just a team on paper, and it's really incredible how bad they messed this thing up. I mean, with that much talent, they also are playing to try to get to the 500 after getting hot lately. But I don't know. I can sign off. I can co-sign on either sides of the offense in this game. I don't think I'm using either pitcher. Although it wouldn't surprise me for a decent outing, but I definitely think that these teams will play. They'll treat it competitive. It's SoCal versus North. It's NoCal versus SoCal. They always treat that little extra. But yeah, I'm talking myself into the Giants a little bit to get contrarian.
So this was interesting. I just want to confirm this would happen. So I was watching the Logan Webb show yesterday. Logan Webb was great, and he was like getting some bad luck. I mean, he was mowing everybody down. He was through 8, but like he was losing. You know what I mean? It's like so unfair almost. He down 1-0, but San Francisco put up 2 in the bottom of the 8th, so that he came in and got the complete game shutout after all in the 9th. So yes, San Francisco's they're playing. they're playing. They're playing to win. Maybe I'll do that like as a sportsman. Maybe that'll show up on the here's the plug. Maybe that'll show up on Bobby's plays of the day that he puts up on the up on the screen. So yeah, I'll start I guess with Seattle Houston.
Yeah.
So good job for me playing Baltimore, announcing that Javier was finished, and then he came in with 11 strikeouts, no problem. So that's the way that baseball's rough, you know. I'm probably just off of this game. The Kirby's good enough to keep me off of Houston. Houston's good enough to keep me off of Kirby. And Seattle, although I like playing them, I don't want to play them against the righty. Maybe just supposed to play Javier after all. Oh my God, am I gonna be like the recency bias freaking super square like this and just bet against him when he's down, then just bet on him after a bounce back performance? You know what? I just might. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
I actually think I might. Yeah, I really do. I'll play him against Seattle righties, and then I'll just complain that I'm terrible after Cal Raleigh hits 3 home runs.
Yeah. So I just want to point out something. There's some funny things that I've been catching up, and I have been focused a little bit more on the betting side of things, and that's partly why I'm catching on to these things. So we have a guy in George Kirby who, in every one of his last 7 starts, he's allowed at least 3 runs, and most of those are in 5 innings. He's allowed 3 runs in I think it's 7 in a row, and 4 a couple times. So now you have one of the better offenses in baseball, and they have a run total of 3.5. That seems a little bit just poked my ears up a little bit.
Right.
Then you have Christian Javier, who hasn't been able to get anybody out for months, and then comes out with his ceiling performance, and now all of a sudden Texas has a 3.9 total. So I'll tell you right now, I'm going to do my bets later, but I'm going to bet the over on this game.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to fade this. And I'm just sort of shocked that Vegas made Houston's run total 3.5. I would have thought even against Kirby, usually Houston gets like the automatic 4, you know?
Okay, right.
For a good pitcher even. It's just kind of weird to see. So caught me a little bit off guard. And this game seems like it has two good pitching options. And I think that they're fine to utilize throughout your things. I think I would rather play Garrett given the matchup than I would Kirby, and he's 1,100 cheaper. So to sum up for me, I'm probably just going to fade this game. And my favorite pitchers to spend up for are Gausman and Garrett at the moment. And my spend downs are going to be a mixture of King, Blackburn, Thompson, and Detmers. I'm actually not crossing off if that Chicago game changes. I know this sounds really nuts, but if you really want to dumpster dive and you want to do something like the Dodgers and Atlanta, you could play like Thompson and Davies at 55 and 5,300. It's crazy, but I'm just saying, like, this slate isn't all that inspiring for. There's a lot of pitching options. There's not a lot of guys that I feel like are like locks. I think that I probably lean King, my favorite spend downs, as being maybe King Thompson at the moment, and spend ups as Gausman Garrett. My stacks are the Dodgers, Atlanta, Milwaukee, and San Francisco. Atlanta, Milwaukee, and Texas, as the full stacks. Pieces I want are the Giants in Colorado.
Atlanta, Texas, and San Diego for me. Pitching, I might end up doing the recency bias special and just go King Javier. You know what I mean? Just both coming off the ceiling performances against teams with a crap load of hitting. If you get the wrong day. The reason why I put this instead of Gausman is because I really want to get up to those Texas and Atlanta and Dodgers teams. I know what you're going to say, dude. You can do it. You can play freaking. I know you.
Actually, I don't know if you can play
Gausman and Steele together, no problem, and play all the Dodgers. I mean, it's like, how do you do that? You always do it.
Actually, the Dodgers you can do it, but Atlanta is a little trickier of a conversation.
Right.
But yeah, so we'll be back with a football show, and good luck to everyone today.